Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We have lots of slides to go through today, so we're going to get started right on time. So the format for this presentation is that we will start by talking about which improvements are being made, why, and why now. The slides we're sharing with you today have all been developed based on the questions that you sent to the parent reps. So we want to thank you for taking the time to make your questions clear to us. And also thanks, as always, to the parent reps for helping us to collect your feedback. Please keep your microphone on mute. We will go through the slides one at a time, all the way until the end. This will make the recording much clearer and easier for our audience after the presentation to follow along. And of course, we will have time at the end of the presentation to answer any additional questions or to clarify any of the information shared in the slides. Okay, we want to just start with a reminder. It's absolutely natural that when changes are happening, especially related to your children, that there's some uncertainty and confusion. We recognize that. As we were collecting questions, we realized that the verbale from the parent rep meeting and also elements of our program, even now, were not necessarily clear to everybody. So our goal is to clarify what we're doing, including the things that will not change. We want to reiterate that our goal is always to do what's best for your children. BES has evolved and changed every year. It's true that the changes happening next year are more pronounced, but the goal is always to do what's best for your children. And please follow along with an open mind. Our goal is to clarify why these changes are good changes. Okay, so why these changes? We are striving to improve the academic excellence of our school. We are an excellent school. We want to improve further upon that. Even when a school is the best school, there is always room to do better. We are currently an exemplary PYP school. We are a high-achieving PYP school among the group, among the PYP schools in Italy as well. Our last authorization visit was 2 years ago, and we passed with reauthorization with very high scores. We want to have an opportunity to do more small group learning. We want to be able to teach the children what they need and when they need it. We are looking at being able to differentiate and improve the way that we teach both English and Italian. We are looking at improving the resources and the teacher training, especially in the area of math. And we need to pivot to match new indications coming from the ministry. Okay, why now? These improvements have been driven by a lot of factors, including parent feedback over the years. Assessment results and teacher reflections on most effective teaching practices are all factors that have led us to make decisions about these improvements. We want to overall improve the offering of the school and adapt to the ever-changing student population. We do have many new students who don't fit the original bilingual model that started many years ago. We have students joining in year, we have students joining from all over the world. And so our student population and their needs is evolving. And we want to make sure that we're able to provide what every individual student requires. These changes were introduced in February at our Consiglio Scolastico meeting. We shared some basic outlines of how we wanted to improve didactics around English, math, and Italian. And of course, we followed up at the following Consiglio Scolastico with more details, including the ones we shared with parent reps. We recognize that it feels late in the year to share and talk about these changes,
Ah, in
but
fase di registrazione. Vabbè, passiamo.
if you could please mute your microphones. Thank you. It's really important that we share these answers and talk about these changes when we have all the information necessary. It would be irresponsible to talk about changes and not be able to answer your questions. So again, we want to thank you and the parent reps for gathering your feedback so that we could present today with all the answers required. So let's talk about who we are now, especially the aspects of BES that are not going to change. This is who we are now and who we will be in the future. We are a PYP school, and we are a scuola paritaria. We are a bilingual school offering 50% of instruction in English and 50% in Italian. We are a collaborative school, not just with families, but also among teachers. Our approach is student-focused. We consider ourselves a strong community, and we are aspirational, always looking to improve and do better. Okay. We have a series of factors that are helping to inform and drive the evolution. We have some external factors. We have some external factors, and we have our own internal goals. So let's talk about those separately. First of all, the external factors are changes that are being made in the PYP. The International Baccalaureate is evolving itself. And the ministerial guidelines from the Italian ministry are also being changed, clarified, and evolved. And so we need to keep up with both of these different lenses. In the PYP and in the ministry guidelines, the content that's being delivered is more disciplinary. This doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to be a transdisciplinary school. It's just that the content that we're delivering is being given to us in a way that identifies more specific expectations, not just in what the students have to learn, but also in the way that we deliver it. So in terms of the PYP, we're looking forward to receiving what they call subject learning continuums. So it's specific advice and guidance for teachers on how to teach geography, how to teach science, et cetera, et cetera. There will also be explicit inquiry progressions, which helps teachers to understand of all the learner profiles, of all the skills that the PYP proposes, which levels at which part in the journey should we be assessing and should we be monitoring and improving. With regards to the ministry guidelines, there is more of a focus on classic civilization and Italian history. We already have all of this mapped in our curriculum and have the flexibility to adapt and add. We're looking at more focus on reading, writing, and grammar in the Italian language. The same is true for English. Like I said earlier, we want to do even better with the way that our students are bilingual and are able to read, write, speak, and listen in 2 separate languages. We're looking at developing critical thinking skills and developing what's referred to as an Italian cultural identity. We do have a separate slide on that later on. Of course, now that our middle school is adopting the MYP and we have a high school to open, this entire evolution also looks at a new, different pathway for our students. We are planning and delivering a journey that starts from 2.5 to 3 years old, all the way to 18 years old. We're preparing BES students to graduate with 2 diplomas from BES. That's our goal, that's our mission. In terms of our internal goals, we're looking at excellence, as I've mentioned a few times, but also clarity. So we're looking at a more structured approach to covering and teaching the ministerial content, which includes a clearer allocation of content areas to specific teachers. This adds accountability, and a more structured approach to assessment and feedback. Our teachers will have a 2-day IB workshop on evidencing learning. And this will greatly impact the way that we share progress with you parents. We're also looking at an improved use of resources, and by that I mean physical resources like books and structures and curriculum, but also human resources. We're looking at a more strategic use of the joy and the magic and the wonder of having two teachers available to teach. This is a luxury, and so we really want to optimize our ability to have two teachers in the room. Because we're inheriting many new empty spaces as the middle school moves on, we have the opportunity for more small group differentiation and learning support. We're also introducing STEM as a specialist subject. So students will have an additional subject in their timetables called STEM, which we will also talk about at a later stage. Okay, so in general, a summary of the changes overall. Units of inquiry are not changing. We are a PYP school. It's not going anywhere. But the responsibility of planning, teaching, and assessing different subjects will be given to specific teachers. Students will continue to have lots of opportunities to learn in both languages across content areas, since our program is bilingual and transdisciplinary. So we'll get into a bit more of that later, but the reality is we're a PYP school. It's a transdisciplinary approach, and who teaches which subject doesn't have a massive impact on what the students are exposed to. History, science, and geography will be taught principally in Italian, but of course our resources and the class discussions we have will continue in both languages. Math will be taught primarily by the English-speaking teachers, but we also have our SEL, which is social emotional learning, given responsibility by the English teacher. However, as I've said, the general classroom and the goals of the learning for each student doesn't change in the PYP context, which is transdisciplinary. So in the first cycle, in year 1 and 2, as there are now, there will be 2 homeroom teachers. The only major difference is that each teacher will be designated to specific content areas. It just means that they will take responsibility for planning, teaching, and evaluating those content areas. In the second cycle, there will be 1 homeroom teacher who is an Italian teacher. There will be an English teacher who teaches all 3 classes, and a math teacher who teaches all 3 classes. This means that the delivery of everything is still 50% Italian and 50% in English. Let's go through a kind of a bozza, a mock-up of what a schedule could look like. So this says 3A, but this could be a general schedule for any grade level. The only difference in the first cycle would be the timing of the breaks. Here you can see the blocks with the English teacher. Okay, so the English teacher is teaching language, the English language, and making connections to the program of inquiry. There's also a separate block for social emotional learning that you'll see in the actual schedule. There's an opportunity for English co-teaching where 2 English teachers are in the room, and math. So math will have specific blocks that you'll be able to see in the schedule. And you will see that there's also math co-teaching blocks where the Italian homeroom teacher and the English teacher homeroom will share the class. Of course, we have subjects. These are subjects that are delivered in English. So drama, PE, music, and STEM will be taught in English. So you can see at this point, about half, if not more than half of the schedule is English or bilingual co-teaching in math. And then the rest, of course, is the Italian language, where the teacher is delivering content and making connections to the central idea and the units of inquiry. Then I've added art and library, which are Italian subject specialists. Okay, so what are the specialists doing? As always, they're making connections to our themes and the content related to our unit of inquiry. English teachers are teaching, obviously, the English language, but also using resources and genres specific to the unit of inquiry. So if the students are studying outer space, they might be writing a science fiction article. If they're learning about the life cycle of a plant, obviously they're learning how to write nonfiction texts. In Italian, they're learning Italian language and grammar and related content specific to the central ideas. And in math, where possible, we make connections to the units of inquiry, and otherwise it's considered a standalone subject that follows its own progression, always building on the skills that were taught previously. Obviously, in the evolution we're talking about, there will be bilingual math lessons where we'll be able to develop students' bilingual math vocabulary and also teach them strategies and skills that are slightly different in Italy compared to a more English approach. This is an example of a central idea. It's bilingual, as always, and I'm just going to throw together a few practical examples of how the subjects, regardless of which language they're taught in, are always connected and rooted to the PYP, to the central ideas. So in Italian, with their Italian teacher, the students could be learning nonfiction research and writing about ecosystems, for example, right? We have a responsibility to respect and protect the biodiversity of other living things. So the students are researching living things, researching biodiversity, and reading and writing nonfiction texts. In history, they're looking at evolution and adaptation, looking at the fossil record, okay, and looking at how things in the past and biodiversity in the past has evolved and changed. In science, they could be looking at biomimetics and learning about animal classification. And of course, in geography, they could be looking at different regions, different climates, and looking at how animals in different regions of the world survive. In English, of course, they could be doing similar work. They could be reading and writing about symbiotic relationships. They could be reading and writing about ecosystems and sustainability. In SEL, which is social emotional learning, they could be talking about how to respect and protect their own personal boundaries and making connections, again, thematically to respecting and protecting, but also their own mental health and their own well-being. So all the subjects have been mapped in the past and always in the future so that what the students are learning are always rooted to this main idea. In math, they could be perhaps working on geometry as an independent subject, but then also learning how to graph and map the migrations of animals throughout history and during climate change. They'd be doing that in English and able to discuss what they learned in Italian. Some creative ideas for specialists could be that during drama lessons, the students are learning movements and sounds of animals. In art, they could be looking at different patterns of animals, zebra stripes, feathers, different types of birds. In PE, they could be looking at needs for nutrition and exercise and water, right? Because they are also living things. In music, they could be learning songs about Mother Earth. They could be learning about instruments made from wood and making a sustainable orchestra. In STEM, they could be using Lego to build models of an ecosystem. So the point being that the content being taught in specific languages does not negate the fact that students will have many opportunities to talk, learn, and discuss this content in both languages. This has always been the case. So our program of inquiry, fed and evolved and changed over years, will continue to evolve. And this gives us an opportunity always to reflect on our units of inquiry, rewrite central ideas, and work with the students and the teachers to make improvements to the program. Planning time, which we currently have, will not change. The Italian teachers will have time to plan together, so will the English team, so will the math team, and most importantly, the whole team will have time every week to plan together, guided by the PYP coordinator, guided by the Italian coordinator, always in line and always making those connections so that regardless of who is teaching what content, the entire team is aware of who's responsible and where the students are going in their learning journey and progress. We had many questions about math and particularly why it's being taught in English. The simplest answer is that as we progress into the middle years and eventually our OSSD diploma, all of the evaluations and credits in the high school will, for math specifically, will be taught in English. That doesn't mean we're not teaching math in Italian, but primarily it will be taught and assessed in English throughout the whole journey of our students at BES. It's important to think about math almost like a third language because it is very visual. It's a completely different system of symbols, and not all math requires language to be good at math. So we're looking at developing vocabulary in a bilingual way during co-teaching. We are developing and are soon ready to share a bilingual glossary, which will support the way that we teach students and the way that we individualize their needs. And we're also going to have explicit preparation for Invalsi in year 2 and year 5. So when the students are getting ready for the Invalsi, we will add more specific workshops to prepare the students and ensure that they are ready to be successful in the Invalsi exams. In terms of vocabulary, in terms of building vocabulary, a lot of the math vocabulary is Latin-based, and so a lot of the vocabulary is quite simple and similar. Sorry, not simple, similar. As you can see here, we have an acute angle, which is an angolo acuto. Giusto? Acuto. Even just the word angle, angolo, are very, very similar. So in many ways, developing a bilingual vocabulary is not a challenge because the words are very similar. However, there are other words that are absolutely not similar at all, like protractor. And so it's important for us to identify these differences and take time for students to recognize and learn a bilingual vocabulary. This is an example of an extract of our bilingual glossary. So everyone will have access, students and parents, obviously teachers, to a bilingual glossary. These keywords are extracted specifically from our current math curriculum. So from our perspective, this is an improvement on the way that we teach and deliver math. It makes it clearer for everybody, including parents, what's expected for students to learn by the end of each year. So we've got English terms, Italian terms, and child-friendly vocabulary and definitions. Okay, there were also questions about the use of the virgola and just the difference in general between an Italian approach to teaching math and let's say more international approach. What we've learned is that especially for students who are very strong in math, very talented naturally as a mathematician, it's easy for them to approach a brand new topic, learn brand new subject and vocabulary in 2 languages, but that for students who are not naturally talented, it can be quite challenging to learn something new. For example, we introduce fractions. If we're introducing fractions to a student who does not know what fractions are, and they're learning that in 2 different languages with 2 separate sets of vocabulary, it can be really challenging to keep up and follow. And so what we're hoping is that, excuse me, I'm just checking my notes here, that the acquisition of new material and concepts will be more effective if it's done initially in 1 language until we can achieve mastery. Once the students have mastered their math skills in English, it will be easier for them to translate, learn a bilingual vocabulary, and continue on understanding in both languages. So a practical example, students are learning the times tables. They've mastered the 6 times tables. They understand the patterns in the tabelline. Then, once they've mastered them, they can practice repeating them in Italian, rather than learning them simultaneously in 2 languages, which can be confusing. One reality that's important to face is the fact that in terms of resources for teachers, the amount of worksheets, workbooks, teacher resources, teacher training in English are significant. Compared to the resources we have available to us in Italian, the variety and richness of resources in English is far superior. And so in terms of the strategies, the methods, the inquiry-based approach to math, none of that will change. It's simply that we're teaching in one language to achieve mastery, to improve the way the students learn and practice math in a more consistent way across the year level and up through the second cycle and first cycle. The fact that we are adding in Val C preparation and pivoting and reallocating our double resources for co-teaching to math is a significant shift to improve the way our students become strong, confident mathematicians. In terms of who will be teaching math next year, the idea is that we are looking at the selection process right now. We have many teachers who are particularly passionate and enthusiastic about teaching math. And so for them, many teachers see this as an opportunity to specialize their teaching abilities. We are looking at other courses of training for the teachers and looking at purchasing more resources for the teachers to use. And of course, the math teachers will have a chance to meet on a weekly basis so that they can plan and share resources collaboratively. This includes the teachers in year 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5. So obviously in the first cycle, it's the English homeroom teacher responsible for math, but they will also have an opportunity to meet and work with the year 3, year 4, and year 5 math specialist. We are investing in what's called White Rose Maths. This is a program that bases its philosophy on teaching for mastery. There are a lot of free resources online. I do encourage you to Google White Rose Maths and have a look at the resources available. There are many things that are there for free. And we're, of course, investing in a subscription and some teacher training so that all of our math teachers are using and teaching using the same methods and developing their mastery as teachers as well. Okay, another question that came through was about science, asking why is it only being taught in Italian? It's not. Yes, it is the responsibility of the Italian teacher, but as we've said a few times now, all of the arguments and subjects that are being delivered in Italian are strongly connected to our units of inquiry and the central idea. When the students are learning, when they're with their English teacher and doing research, they will still be investigating the science topics in English. It's just that the assessment and the actual planning and teaching is delivered by a specific teacher in Italian. We also have the addition of a STEM specialist who will be able to make specific connections to that science. S in STEM stands for science, who will be able to make connections also to what's going on in the classroom. So in the same way that Mr. E makes connections to the units of inquiry during a math lesson, our STEM teacher will make connections to the science curriculum that was taught in Italian. So it's not only in Italian. However, the connections between the science, history, and geography curriculum in primary school are really strongly linked. And so it also helps to give the ownership and responsibility to one teacher who's delivering those 3 content areas. For example, the evolution of life on Earth is a connection between the history curriculum and the science curriculum. The evolution of society and how communities grew around rivers, for example, like the Roman Empire, is a strong connection between geography and science. And so it makes sense that the person responsible to deliver the science curriculum is also able to deliver those connections. Okay, some clarifications about co-teaching. We have always used many different varieties of co-teaching models. Sometimes it's an Italian teacher leading and then an English teacher following up with a discussion. This has included math co-teaching. So we do math co-teaching even now. We have found, though, that when given the choice in this bilingual context of co-teaching, that most of our students will choose to speak Italian because they're given the option. So we really want to utilize the opportunity to have two teachers in the classroom and dedicate this value time to learning in small groups and to focusing towards math, because this is something that we want to improve. This is only made possible by the availability of all the new spaces that middle school will leave behind. Yes, you can do small group learning in one classroom, but to be able to, take a small group to a separate space where there's calm and quiet and more space and resources, it's just a much more efficient and rich opportunity. So it's really thanks to the space that we're able to make these changes. Well-known methods like the community circle, class discussions, all those opportunities to share what they understand and make connections between languages and subjects will not disappear. That will still happen on a weekly basis. Some more clarifications about co-teaching. We will actually have more co-teaching next year. Currently, we have about 2 or 3 blocks of bilingual co-teaching. We say blocks because not every block is a full hour. Some are less, some are more. Next year, we're looking at 2 full blocks of bilingual math co-teaching, 1 or 2 blocks of Italian co-teaching when there's 2 Italian teachers in the room, and 1 or 2 blocks of English co-teaching where there are 2 English teachers in the room. So in fact, we're increasing the amount of co-teaching for next year, which we're really excited about. A little bit more about STEM. The acronym of STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. These are all really exciting hands-on learning opportunities where students can learn and play and use their hands in real-life context to build and, of course, discuss what they're learning in other classes. Talking a little bit more about spaces, there were some questions about how the school will be organized, including new labs, etc. So every class in primary school, as it has now, will have their home. They'll have their own room. So obviously in the first cycle, 1A students will have their 1A classroom. So that's not something that's going to change. In terms of new spaces, the fact that we are inheriting some empty spaces, we're looking at allocating different types of furniture and layouts to multiple spaces. We're looking at multifunctional furniture, using what we've got, ordering some things that are new so that you can have small groups of students sitting at a desk. You could have small groups of students sitting on a carpet in a circle. We could set up some experiments. We could have additional reading and writing and maths resources distributed across these kind of multifunctional spaces so that no matter which teacher is in the room, there will be always the resources that they need. This will also allow our enhanced English and enhanced Italian teachers to have larger spaces that they can use for their small group lessons. Spaces like spaces for lunch clubs, dance, guitar, piano, judo will all be able to take advantage of these new spaces, which will also release some time for us to use the palestra for structured play during our lunch breaks. And also these will become presentation spaces. As many of you have experienced, when we have learning celebrations, it can be quite noisy when we try to squeeze everyone into the palestra. And so having more spaces available will allow us to spread out con calma, less people, easier to hear, and use these classrooms also as presentation spaces. And of course, we are building a STEM lab, which on the previous screen you saw is called a maker space. So this is where you will find our Lego equipment, but also recyclable materials and lots of different resources for the STEM teacher to engage the students in hands-on experiments. Of course, none of this would be possible without more space. And so thanks, Resegone, thank you to the middle school and our new secondary campus. We will have classrooms available, dotted throughout the school map, so that when a teacher wants, even spontaneously, to take a small group to a separate space, we will have that space. which again, we're really excited about. Okay, there were some other pedagogical questions that came through, so we're just going to go through those kind of quickly. It seems that the school's evolving in a more disciplinary direction with a major attention on Italian national identity, grammar, etc. And what does this look like? So it's true that we are going to dedicate more time to the teaching of grammar and vocabulary in both languages. But as far as the concept of an Italian national identity, we have not yet been given what that definition is. And of course, we are an IB school. And so we are not interested in accepting a one-size-fits-all definition for what it means to be Italian. We are an IB school. Our context is that we are a bilingual school in Italy. And of course, we celebrate and appreciate the diversity that we have among our families and students. We don't adhere to the idea that being Italian means one thing. And, you know, context is everything. All of us are influenced by the fact that we're at BES, the fact that we're in Milano, and the fact that we're in Italy. The same is true for non-Italians. We have our own Italian identity as well. And so there's no reason to fear an idea that the ministry is going to give us a one-line definition of what it means to Italian that we need to stick to, because our identity as a PYP school at BES is our own. And so that's something we will continue to celebrate. Will the reduction of people mean less people or less surveillance in the garden? This is a misunderstanding. There is not a reduction of teachers. Just a reallocation of resources. For example, the STEM teacher is a new position. Absolutely, supervision in the garden will not be reduced. We're actually looking at staggering our morning breaks and afternoon breaks in a way that will reduce the number of students in the garden so that they have more space to play, but the number of teachers won't change. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at trying to have some structured activities for students to choose also in the palestra during the lunch breaks. So having a soccer coach, having some dance lessons as an optional activity for students to do at lunch will give them more to choose and also reduce the number of students in the garden. What about homework? Homework won't really change. The teachers assigning the homework will be clear. And as always, we'll send the homework home once per week and it will be due a week later. We are looking, however, at ways to clarify the homework so that it's easier for the students to complete their homework independently, and also so that it's clearer for parents to know how to support and follow their children at home. Will the students in year 2 and year 5 still be reshuffled? Yes. So this is another thing that will not change. At the end of year 2, the students are reshuffled to create new cohorts for year 3, 4, and 5. The year 3 students stay together in their new family until the end of year 5, and then they will be reshuffled as they enter middle school. Another detail is that as now, the Italian teacher, who is the Italian teacher in year 1, will continue to follow the students up to year 2. And the year 3 Italian teacher will continue to follow the students up for year 4 and year 5. So this is not a structural change that we're making. It's not going to change. Okay, I'm gonna drink water because that was a lot. So I'm finishing on this slide just as a reminder of who we are and what's not changing. And at this point, you are welcome to unmute yourself, ask a question in either English or Italian, and we will take the time now to elaborate and make any clarifications necessary. I will stop sharing the screen, turn on my camera, you can see my face, and we pass it over to you if there's any questions. Michaela is also here with me if you want to ask in Italian.
Posso fare una domanda?
Sì.
In italiano.
Va bene.
Grazie. Io non ho capito una cosa. Avete detto che non c'è riduzione del personale. Io avevo capito che dalla terza in poi, invece che 3 maestre di italiano e 3 maestre di inglese, ce ne sarebbero state 3 di italiano e 2 di inglese. Una di
Sì.
inglese per l'intera annualità e una di matematica per l'intera annualità.
Sì.
Invece non è così?
È così, ma abbiamo una nuova insegnante di STEM. Allora, uno di nostro inglese becomes the STEM teacher. And also, we're taking advantage of the additional personnel for some of that small group learning, the English co-teaching, for example, learning support, additional English, additional Italian.
Ma scusi, STEM però mi sembra di aver capito che è 1 ora a settimana, in realtà è uno specialista in più, non è un insegnante.
No,
Cioè non è 1 ora a settimana, perché dal timetable che avete messo era 1 ora a settimana STEM, come lo specialista.
sì.
Quindi è uno specialista, non è un insegnante. È uno specialista in più, non è una maestra in più.
Okay, my definition is that a specialist teacher is a teacher, right?
Yeah,
Like-
no, sì, sicuramente. Però lo specialista ha 1 ora a settimana,
With
mentre
every class.
Esatto.
Yeah.
E quindi è comune a tutta la scuola. Mentre
Sì.
la maestra, noi siamo abituati fino a quest'anno che la maestra era di classe, quindi una di inglese e una di italiano.
Vamos de carrinho. A mamãe vai arrumar o cabelo.
Can you please mute yourselves if you're not speaking? Because we're plenty of people here and we're trying to listen close. Thank you.
Miki, do you want to?
Allora, io non ho ben capito, nel senso, non c'è una riduzione del personale perché le insegnanti presenti attualmente vengono riallocate in altri ruoli. Per esempio, appunto, come ha detto Aaron, c'è un insegnante che si occuperà dello STEM su tutta la scuola primaria.
Appunto, uno specialista. Cioè, se noi guardiamo le maestre, noi avevamo 3 maestre italiano e 3 maestre di inglese per annualità. 6
Certo.
maestre. Adesso abbiamo 3 maestre di italiano e 2 maestre di inglese. 5. C'è
A
una
partire in
dalla
terza, quarta e quinta,
C'è
esatto.
una riduzione.
Quell'insegnante in più viene riallocata in altri ruoli, per esempio lo STEM, per esempio i piccoli gruppi di inglese, per esempio il supporto nelle classi, per esempio il supporto magari a dei casi specifici per bambini che ne hanno bisogno. Quindi in realtà noi non riduciamo il personale, ma lo andiamo a riallocare nelle aree, diciamo, che abbiamo individuato come aree che hanno bisogno di avere del personale in più.
Ok, la mia domanda, perché forse non ho capito io. Per annualità,
Sì?
le maestre che si occupano esclusivamente di quell'annualità, ad oggi sono 6. Dall'anno
Sì.
prossimo, dalla terza in poi, saranno 5.
5, esatto.
C'è una maestra in meno.
È una
che
maestra
si
in meno
occupa
sull'annualità.
esclusivamente di quell'annualità.
Sì,
Quindi
sì.
in realtà ci sarà una riduzione del personale. Cioè, alla fine, per ogni annualità c'è una maestra in meno. È questo che io non riesco a capire. Cioè, a fronte del discorso che la scuola sta migliorando, che il metodo è migliore, su quale sicuramente avrete ragione, rimane il fatto che mi parlate di co-teaching, di miglioramenti a fronte di una maestra in meno. È questo che io non riesco a capire.
Allora,
Come
se
può
lei
essere un
intende-
miglioramento una maestra in meno?
Allora, se lei intende sulla singola annualità a partire dalla terza, sì, c'è un insegnante in meno. A livello di scuola non c'è una riduzione del personale perché l'insegnante in meno che prima era destinata a quell'annualità viene destinata e riallocata in altre posizioni che abbiamo identificato noi come scuola essere necessarie e essere importanti ed essere prioritarie.
Giorgia, to sum things up, lei ha perfettamente ragione. C'è una maestra in meno a livello di singola classe.
Annualità?
Hanno scelto di allocare le risorse, non diminuendo l'organico in maniera numerica, su altre cose. Quindi il risultato finale è che c'erano 3 maestri di inglese, 3 maestri di italiano prima, adesso ci saranno 3 di una lingua e 2 dell'altra. E questa altra persona non farà un insegnamento costante come sta succedendo adesso. Questo è il wrap up della conversazione. Non credo che stiano cercando di essere evasivi loro, è molto chiaro il concetto, non credo che serva richiedere la cosa ancora perché l'hanno ripetuta direi 3-4 volte ormai. Cioè
Sì,
c'è un insegnante in meno che si dedicherà costantemente alla classe, quindi c'è una riduzione di personale di quello specifico argomento.
Sì, però il tema che diceva Giorgio, probabilmente, buongiorno a tutti, e credo che il tempo utilizzato per la lingua inglese, visto che ci sarà un insegnante di inglese in meno sull'annualità, sarà inferiore rispetto al programma attuale. Giorgio,
No, assolutamente.
No.
No, abbiamo e manteniamo sempre il 50-50, quindi non ci sono riduzione a livello di esposizione oraria in lingua inglese. Assolutamente.
Michela, per farci apprezzare questa non differenza,
Sì.
forse sarebbe stato utile vedere il timetable di oggi sovrapposto al timetable di domani. Voi avete fatto vedere il
Can
timetable
I,
di domani.
Sì, sì, vai, vai, vai. Possiamo farlo in diretta.
so I'll just add some specific math. Basically, the students are in the building for close to 37 hours per week. When you remove lunch breaks and recess time, you're left with, let's say, 30 hours, 15 hours in Italian, 15 hours in English. 15 hours in English will be 6.5 or so with the English teacher who teaches English with the whole grade, right? So the English teacher in year 3 will teach for 6 blocks in 3A, 6 blocks in 3B, 6 blocks in 3C. So that's just the English language and unit connections, reading, writing, speaking. The math teacher in year 3 will teach an additional 6 blocks in those classes. So when you add up the number of hours being taught in English, it's the same as now. It's just that it's 2 teachers who are specializing in English and math rather than one teacher for 5A, for example, who's teaching a little bit of everything. So by clarifying who's delivering the content, we're also able to change the schedules and make it more consistent across each year group.
Can I talk? Sorry. Yeah, so to some extent, I don't know why it matters how many teachers there are per year set. I mean, if you look at the single class, there used to be 2 teachers. Now, actually, they have 3 teachers. So you can actually say that the number of teachers per class are increasing, not decreasing.
Yes. The number of reference teachers for the parents will be 3 instead of 2.
Right,
So they'll
so-
have a specific math teacher to ask questions, a specific English language teacher to ask questions, and then the homeroom Italian teacher to ask questions of.
That's right. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions?
Good morning to everyone. If you don't mind, can I pop in?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Michela, for your introduction of all of this. I'm Umberto Pereira with my wife, Laura. We have 2 children with you, Andrea and Giovanni. They're now in reception and transition. So this will kind of come for the next year and for the rest of the future. This is a little bit off topic regarding the teachings you have been showing until now. I just wanted to ask when this is complete out of my ignorance of your method, whether at which time and which age a 3rd language is gonna be introduced, if there's any. So when German, French, or Spanish, or Chinese, whatever, is gonna pop into the curriculum.
So currently, French and Spanish is introduced in Prima Media in year 6. So the students go to middle school and in the end of year 5, like now, they are kind of selecting either Spanish or French to continue into middle school. But we have been having discussions about introducing a 3rd language in upper primary, whether it's German, Chinese, as a 3rd option. Certainly not as a language of instruction, because we are a bilingual school. We're not interested in becoming TESS.
No, absolutely. I'm just talking, like, broadly speaking, like,
Sure,
to be
sure.
able to begin. I mean, to learn the basics. I mean, you don't want to hear
Yeah.
my French, but I mean, I know
Sure.
at least how to have my way around
Yeah.
a CT.
So that's year 6.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
No worries.
Aaron, once again on math, please.
Mhm.
You mentioned that math is going to be taught in English mainly. There are moments of math co-teaching in the map
Yep.
you've shown. Can you dive into the the way that you're going to deal with the fact that in Valsi are in Italian. I know you went over there in the presentation, but it was quick. So if you don't mind, please.
For sure.
Thank you.
So essentially, we have our own math program that we've developed over years. So we have the ministerial content for math that's expected. The ministry posts the math objectives as by the end of year 3, the children will be able to, and by the end of year 5. So we've essentially translated that curriculum and then compared it with other international curricula to map a progression of when to teach and introduce different skills. So we have our own math curriculum. Up until now, we've been delivering it in a bilingual way that is fine. The students do well on the InValC, and they are good, mostly confident mathematicians. But what we're trying to do is have excellent mathematicians. And so the way it is right now is that the collaborative approach, Miki, do you mind muting yourself? I'm feedbacking in myself. Okay, there we go. Right now, during team planning, as we're planning the units of inquiry and looking at the math curriculum, we're following a path together. But sometimes it happens that while the English teachers are teaching one kind of strand or area of math, the Italian teachers are teaching other areas of math so that we're covering everything we need to. And this works in most cases, but there are situations where what's being taught in English is fundamental as a basic to be able to do what's being taught in Italian. And sometimes it becomes disjointed so that the students are progressing in English and progressing in Italian, but not necessarily consolidating the skill set and building upon what their overall math ability is. And so the idea is that by streamlining and having math being taught primarily in English, we're looking at consolidation and mastery of math skills and understanding, and then essentially translating that understanding and mastery and practicing the same skills, but in Italian. So if students are learning geometry and they're learning how to measure angles and draw squares and talk about the properties of triangles, they can do that in English during their English lessons. And then at the end of the week, when they have co-teaching, the Italian homeroom teacher, who's already a reference person, can come to the classroom and say, okay, in Italian, this is triangolo. And then the teacher switches entirely to Italian with a small group and repeats and practices the same skills that they've mastered, but does it in an Italian language and in an Italian context, always highlighting and identifying the vocabulary that is the most different, like highlighting which words really don't match in English and Italian. And taking opportunities, for example, if students are learning place value of numbers up to 1 million, or looking at decimal place value, when they're practicing those mastered skills in Italian, they're going to be switching to the virgola and understanding that in the more English context, we use the punto, a decimal point, whereas in Italian, you have to remember to use the virgola for these large numbers. So connecting that to InValC preparation, the students will spend the previous weeks leading up to the assessment practicing and evaluating what they're good at and setting goals and practicing to prepare for the test and knowing that, okay, on the test, they're going to expect you to use the virgola. And on the test, if you're doing long division, they'll expect to see your working out done in the, let's say, Italian method, which is, it's the same method, but it just looks different. And our plan is to have visuals of also these different methods also to be present in our glossary. So we're essentially going to send home like a bilingual math English dictionary that includes examples of what it looks like with your English teacher and what it looks like with your Italian teacher. So aware that this is maybe, you know, a little bit more confusing for parents who don't speak English at home. We're providing tools necessary, not just for the teachers, but also to help the parents help their kids.
Thank you.
Hello, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. I have just one doubt, and I just want to ask you about this. So my feeling is that we're gaining on specialization here. So we're narrowing in more on specific learning objectives in the topics. What we may be losing, and this is just an open issue, is on bilingual culture, meaning that once we have one home teacher, just a home teacher in Italian, my only doubt is that we may be losing on the fact of having a reference point culturally in English. And that may, I mean, I'm just thinking, have you considered that aspect? Which I understand there's a trade-off and you can't do everything, but I have a feeling that we are losing out somewhere. I mean, it's fair enough, right? But having just one home teacher in Italian, not having one in English, may have an impact on the level of exposure to English culture.
Sure. I think the important word here isn't culture, but relationship. And I think the children, as they always do, will form and build strong relationships with all of their teachers, just like they do with drama. When they'll have their English teacher, they'll have their math teacher, and typically those are their reference people that they love. They will still see their English teacher in the Mensa. They'll still hang out with their math teacher during break time. So while they might not have their class teacher who's this one person, or their two kind of parents in the classroom as this bilingual couple, I believe that the relationship and the exposure to the English culture won't be impacted. I can definitely see the observation. Like I see where you're coming from, and it is one of those, it's a factor that we're considering for sure. But I think what we're gaining is worth it.
Fair enough, yeah.
Aggiungo anche il fatto che l'opportunità di lavorare anche molto più spesso in piccolo gruppo può anche consolidare queste relazioni, no? Il fatto di poter essere molto più spesso con un insegnante, con un gruppo ristretto di studenti, favorisce comunque anche la relazione e diciamo, lo stringere e l'approfondire una relazione magari in più rispetto ad essere sempre in rapporto 1 a 25, 1 a 20, insomma. Quindi anche questo aspetto può giocare un po' a nostro vantaggio su quello che sta dicendo lei, insomma, che effettivamente è un punto.
Sì, è il fatto che l'insegnante è trasversale a 3 classi, quindi è vero che noi abbiamo piccoli gruppi, però come gli specialisti sono visti come specialisti, quindi come punti di riferimento specialistici, no? Diverso avere un punto di riferimento come home teacher che i bambini, soprattutto in questa età, vedono come un riferimento anche culturale, secondo me.
Certo.
Quindi secondo me non è banale, ma non dico che è difficile catturare tutti gli aspetti, però secondo me è un aspetto che vale la pena monitorare e forse nel tempo ci possono fare degli aggiustamenti. Poi so che
Assolutamente.
voi monitorate tutto, quindi magari è una cosa da considerare. Ecco.
Sì. Ecco, rispetto agli specialisti, comunque il bambino è a contatto con l'insegnante di lingua inglese in matematica e di lingua inglese in lingua inglese per 5-6 ore alla settimana, no? Lo specialista la vede magari 1 ora alla settimana, però questo è un aspetto che ha fatto bene a sottolineare e sicuramente vale la pena monitorare.
Grazie.
Grazie.
Se mi posso agganciare, perché avevo lo stesso dubbio, riformulato in modo un po' diverso, però ci tenevo a condividerlo perché il mio pensiero era col fatto che adesso ci sarà l'insegnante, non sto parlando di numero di ore ovviamente, questo mi è molto chiaro, ma il fatto che ci sarà un insegnante, un main teacher di italiano e che gli altri insegnanti di inglese siano condivise o condivisi, mi viene il dubbio che passi un po' il messaggio che l'inglese diventa secondary language. Come messaggio, il fatto che io ho una maestra di italiano a cui faccio riferimento, no? E una serie di insegnanti di inglese che sono condivise dalle altre classi, se non possa passare un po' questo messaggio agli studenti e alle studentesse. Non so se mi sono spiegato.
Sì, assolutamente sì. Appunto, come dicevo anche prima, signor Filippo, è una cosa che possiamo monitorare, sicuramente varrà la pena monitorare. Poi chiaramente diciamo, la differenza lo fa il tipo di relazione che il docente instaura con il ragazzo, e soprattutto noi abbiamo operato questo cambiamento, questa evoluzione nel secondo ciclo, quando i ragazzi sono un pochino più grandi. Di conseguenza ci si avvicina verso il mondo della mid school, dove in realtà avranno molti insegnanti, molti professori differenti, no? Quindi diciamo è anche un modo per accompagnare i ragazzi e preparare i ragazzi ad un contesto che sarà poi quello.
I would also add that the Italian homeroom teacher as the primary figure is the way it is now, because that's the teacher that follows the kids. It's always been true that the year one teacher who follows the students up to year two follows them, but doesn't necessarily have the same English colleague. So the idea that the Italian homeroom teacher is that kind of primary figure that the parents also communicate more often with and have the ability to speak Italian with, is the primary figure as the reference person for the kids and for the families. And so in this way, we're kind of acknowledging that while also working to improve the model. So the fact is we're not, you know, changing every teacher every year, but typically the students have 5 different English teachers as they move up through the current model. And so it's true that sometimes the English teacher does follow the class. It can also be true that in the second cycle, our current English teacher could be the new English teacher for the following year, and they see them for 6 hours instead of 12, you know? So we're also looking at trying to maintain those relationships wherever we can. Obviously can't share my organigramma with you just yet, but we're definitely working on it.
Io ho una domanda, posso? Sono d'accordo con Davide e con Filippo su questo dubbio che hanno, lo condivido, e volevo porvi questo mio dubbio. Noi abbiamo detto che l'italiano è una lingua, l'inglese è un'altra lingua, la matematica è una terza lingua, perché ovviamente è un linguaggio diverso, un vocabolario specifico, no? Il fatto che adesso l'italiano sia dedicato alla storia, alla scienza, alla geografia, e l'inglese alla matematica, alla parte socio-emotiva, non impoverisce un po' il vocabolario inglese dei nostri bambini? Cioè il fatto che storia, scienza, geografia siano in italiano e meno in inglese.
Ecco, la ringrazio per aver
È un
posto
po' un
questa
dubbio.
domanda, perché secondo me c'è un grande misunderstanding. Allora, le discipline vengono allocate ad uno specifico insegnante, questo è quello che abbiamo detto ed è vero. In realtà però, quando gli insegnanti insegnano la lingua inglese, non si occupano soltanto di insegnare la grammatica, i tempi verbali e la lingua intesa proprio come morfologia, lessico, riflessione sulla lingua, ma come avviene adesso la lingua è connessa soprattutto nella parte di produzione e di lettura alla unit, e questo rimane invariato. Cioè è vero che, che scienze, geografia e storia verranno insegnate in italiano, ma è altrettanto vero che, come avviene adesso, soprattutto poi nel secondo ciclo, dove chiaramente i contenuti sono più legati alle discipline, l'insegnante inglese utilizza delle risorse connesse alla unit, quindi gli insegnanti inglesi continueranno a leggere testi informativi sul corpo umano, gli insegnanti inglesi continueranno a leggere testi sull'impero romano in quinta elementare, gli insegnanti inglesi continueranno a far scrivere ai ragazzi testi per esempio regolativi o testi informativi che si connettono alle unit, quindi in realtà il vocabolario legato alle discipline più umanistiche o più scientifiche verrà comunque sviluppato. Infatti le connessioni con per quanto riguarda la produzione scritta e la lettura avvengono ora e avverranno anche in futuro. Questo modello non implica un cambiamento in questi termini. Non so se mi sono spiegata, perché questa è già la seconda volta che emerge questo dubbio, quindi vuol dire che non è chiaro per i genitori. Facendo degli esempi concreti, mi viene in mente una Year 5, per esempio. Nella unit riguardanti i governi, gli insegnanti inglesi anche l'anno prossimo prenderanno le risorse e leggeranno relativamente a che cosa avveniva in Grecia, dove si è sviluppata la democrazia. Gli insegnanti inglesi continueranno a scrivere, a far scrivere ai ragazzi in inglese dei testi argomentativi, utilizzando tutto quel lessico, tutta quella vasta gamma di parole che appartengono a quella unit. Quindi in realtà il vocabolario specifico viene sviluppato all'interno delle lezioni di inglese, anziché nella singola lezione di storia, geografia e scienze.
Sarà importante quindi focus su come è strutturata le ore di inglese.
Assolutamente. Assolutamente. Non so se sono stata chiara.
Sì, sì, Chiara, grazie.
Ok, prego.
Io avrei una domanda. Siccome la vostra scuola è famosa anche per non trattare un argomento unico, ma fare un collegamento fra tutti gli argomenti, dividendo le materie tra le maestre, sarà più a compartimenti stagni la spiegazione degli vari argomenti tipo storia e geografia, o ci sarà comunque questo ciclo di argomenti, ecco?
Allora, la nostra scuola è una scuola PWP, il PWP è transdisciplinare, di conseguenza questo non cambierà, anzi i collegamenti verranno mantenuti, le unit, il nostro programma of inquiry continuerà ad esistere, magari andremo a modificare o a migliorare alcune central idea, ma tutti i collegamenti, tutta diciamo la ricchezza che deriva dal fatto di considerare un argomento in un'ottica transdisciplinare, di fare collegamenti tra le discipline, verrà mantenuta. Vuoi aggiungere qualcos'altro?
Any other questions?
Hello, everyone. If I may also ask a question, please. It's just about the co-teaching. As it is now, basically when you have an Italian teacher and English teacher all together in the same room, will it remain in any way, or the subject's going to be taught in English and in Italian, but only separately? As co-teaching as it is now, I'm interested exactly about this.
So co-teaching as it is now,
Yeah, like when there are two teachers together.
There's two teachers together, and it's their current English and Italian assigned to the class. The activities that are carried out are usually quite open-ended. They're planned by the entire team, and the idea is to explore concepts and content always related to the unit of inquiry. Sometimes it's math specifically related to the unit of inquiry, so they're also practicing math skills. And sometimes it's more discussion-based, making a reflection on what they've learned, et cetera, et cetera.
But will it remain?
In this format, no, because we're reallocating the opportunity to have two teachers in the room to have more specific support and development of math as an important area. And we're adding co-teaching hours where there are two Italian teachers and two English teachers, which currently does not exist.
Yeah, this I understood, but I was just wondering about this bilingual family style.
Yes. So like I said earlier, what we found is that in this bilingual family style that we enjoy, it is a fun time in the classroom, and the activities are creative and interesting. However, given the option, most students speak for those entire 2 or 3 blocks in Italian. Because it's got this kind of open, soft approach to bilingualism and having the two teachers in the room, unless the activity has been explicitly structured to be delivered in English and the discussion points in English, or the questions to discuss today are in English, the conversation in the classroom tends to be more Italian than it is English. So obviously there's translations happening. The English teacher might not speak Italian, and so there's a translation and some sharing of vocabulary. But the fact that we have an opportunity to have two teachers in the classroom is a luxury that we want to reallocate for better learning and for higher academic success.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. I think it's an important part to add that to improve anything, change is necessary. And it is true that sometimes you have to move away from something that's nice to move towards something that's better. Any other questions? Just going to throw it out there as well that when we finish this session, if there are questions you have or that pop up upon reflection, please do email myself and Michaela or the class teachers or your parent reps. Email anyone you can think of. We will get your questions, and we can also put together kind of like a follow-up document so that when we share the recordings of these workshops, we can also share these questions also came up after the fact. Here are the answers so that the conversation can continue beyond this Zoom call. We still have a few minutes if anybody has a question.
Yeah, I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
From the teacher's perspective, for example, the math teacher, how many classes or how many classes is he, or how many groups of kids is he teaching or is she teaching?
So in the first cycle, the English teacher will teach just math to their own class. Whereas in year 3, there will be one math teacher who teaches all 3 sections. So in theory, the year 3 math teacher will teach 6 blocks in each class. So just in grade 3, though. They won't do math across the same grade level. And so
is that true? Sorry,
that's true for year 4 and for year 5.
But is that true also for the other English teacher?
Yes. So there's a year 3 English teacher who just teaches year 3 and follows the students in each class in year 3. And
can you explain again the difference between grade 1st and 2nd and then year 3, 4, 5? In that sense. So you said that is a little bit different for year 1st and year 1 and 2.
So for the first cycle for year 1 and 2,
yeah,
we're continuing with a similar model to what we have now, which is 2 teachers per class.
Got it. I that wasn't clear to me.
Okay. But between those 2 teachers, there's a clearer allocation of content.
Got it.
Then when you move up into the second cycle, we have a specialist English and a specialist math teacher who does just 1 grade level each.
Okay, makes sense.
No worries.
Thank you.
It's hard to create a visual for that. So we've got a couple different iterations of tables and things, but at the presentation we're doing this afternoon for the second cycle specifically, there's like a deeper dive into what it will look like.
Okay, thanks.
Last chance. Any other questions?
Aaron, one last doubt, if I may.
Sure.
You decided to make this move now because...
Why now?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of something that we're always working on. You know, even shuffling the students at the end of year 2 was something new a few years ago. It used to be a shuffle at the end of year 3. So there are changes and evolutions that happen every year with the school. Behind the scenes, the content and the curriculum is constantly evolving. This change is coming now as the school population is changing and as the profile of our school and the opening of our high school is about to happen. So we are evolving to prepare students in a different and better way now that we have a different vision now for where our students will end up. For the last 30 years since the school opened, the vision has been, let's get the students ready to go to any high school that they want. But now we're getting them ready to go to our high school. And so we're preparing and shifting things so that our students from year 5 can go into year 6 and then into year 9 with all the skills and the content and all the kind of philosophical background that we need for them to graduate with a double diploma at the end of year 12. So by expanding, we're also evolving. And the high school opens in September, so now's the time.
Thanks.
No worries. Okay, we will end the session there. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see so many people passionate and interested. I realize that some of the questions and answers are, you know, a bit hard to visualize and imagine what it's going to look like until we're really in it. But I just want to thank you for your collaboration and cooperation. Please, as I said, if any doubts or additional questions pop up in the next few weeks, let us know, and we can put together some additional resources and answers for everyone. This session is being recorded, including this question and answer part at the end. We will share the recording with the entire school community once we've done our presentation this afternoon and taken a few days to collect feedback and additional questions. So early next week, we'll share the recording so that the entire school community can keep up and catch up and ask additional questions. I think it's important to note that we're not just talking about changes. The kind of key word here is evolution. And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, change can be challenging, but these decisions are being made to help your children and to help them to achieve success. With that, I thank you again for coming. I'm going to close the session and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Grazie, arrivederci.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Grazie.